Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Rebecca, otherwise known as Hypnot Hooray Online, and this is podcast episode number 11. So it hasn't been that long, I guess, since my last podcast episode, but I do have a finished object, which I'm wearing today. And I did want to share some of the challenges that I'm having with some of the whips that I'm working on right now. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity to check in and film this podcast. So yes, as I mentioned, I do have my finished object. This was a test knit that I did for Haley of Ozetta, and it's the Lakes V-neck pullover. I am currently still dog sitting, and Roy is very confused who I'm talking to right now, and he's also very enamored by his tennis ball, so there is a bit of thumping going on right now. I'm gonna try and get him to calm down for the podcast so you can hear me a little bit better, so I may have to take a break and get him to calm down and relax. But yes, I have my V-neck pullover. Okay, so I ended up bringing him upstairs to where my partner is because I have a feeling that he's going to want to play throughout the whole time I'm filming. I think maybe me talking to somebody that's not there is kind of throwing him off, so he's a little bit confused. But yes, I'm going to continue with chatting about my finished object. So for this pullover, I used 3 strands of yarn held together. I used 2 strands of Saona in the shade Guthrie. This is the leftovers that I have. And I held it with Knitting for Olive Soft Silk Mohair in the shade Dusty Moose. And this yarn was gifted for the test knit. I have used Saona before in the past for summer garments, but never for a more warmer piece like this. So it was nice to work with it in a different type of fabric. As for the process of this pullover, it's a very similar construction to the Lakes pullover. The only thing is this one incorporates a V-neck instead of the original one, which is a crew neck. The suggested ease is basically the same between the 2 patterns, but the gauge is slightly different. There's a 1 stitch difference. I wrote it down here because I'm going to confuse myself, I think, and say the wrong thing. But the Lakes V-neck is 17 stitches on 5.5mm needles, and the pullover is 18 stitches on 5mm needles. So just a little bit of a difference, I think, because these the yarn that Haley used in the sample was a little bit different this time around. But ultimately, it's basically the same pullover, just with a V-neck incorporated into this design. I knit a size small, if I didn't already mention, and like with all of the Ozetta designs that I've knit in the past, I've had to size down my needle size. So this pattern calls for 5.5mm needles, and I used 5mm needles. And as for the process of how this sweater is knit, it's a top-down saddle shoulder construction with 1x1, pretty long, I guess, rib hem details. The saddle shoulder is not a contiguous saddle shoulder construction, but it does create a really striking, I think, balance at the top of the sweater. I think it adds a lot to otherwise like a pretty basic stockinette sweater. It's not my favorite saddle shoulder construction, so the knitting experience of this sweater is still pretty nice and relaxing. It's knit at a larger gauge. I used 5mm needles, and it's just stockinette, so it is a pretty relaxing project. I really enjoyed having this project to knit. Now there's the NBA playoffs, so I've been watching a lot of TV with my boyfriend, and so yeah, it's been a really nice relaxing project. But in terms of the details of this pullover, I think that they're worth it in the end because I do really like how the finished sweater looks, but it is very involved. So starting with the saddle shoulder, I think I mentioned before in my last podcast episode, or maybe the one before that when I was starting this sweater, but you do work the 2 saddle shoulder panels separately. So they're 2 separate pieces, and then you leave live stitches here on hold because that gets integrated into the sleeves, which I think is a really cool design detail. But you knit those 2 saddle shoulder panels first, and then you pick up for the back, knit the back, you pick up for the front, then you knit the front, and then after that you join in the round, and then you pick up stitches for the sleeve. So overall, with this saddle shoulder design, there are a lot of ends to weave in. I would say with each sleeve, there's about 4 or 5 ends, if I'm counting correctly. I took a photo before I wove them all in. I actually wove in all the ends of this sweater, which is really surprising because I usually will weave in maybe the more obvious ones like on the sleeve and the body, but all the other ones I kind of just leave. But for this one, I was like, no, it's a test knit. I want it to look very clean and finished, so I wove in all the ends. But yes, there's a lot of ends to weave in. I always never weave in ends, but really it's not that big of a deal. I just sat down and it took me about 10 minutes to weave in all the ends, maybe 15. So it really wasn't a big time commitment, but I don't know. It's just not as seamless as other saddle shoulder designs that I've knit in the past. That's okay. Another thing that took a long time was the neckline. So this neckline is a 1x1 rib and you pick up the stitches afterwards. It's a pretty shallow V-neck as well. So I do like the fit. I usually wear, whenever I wear V-necks, I like to have a layer underneath. So you can still see that poking through, but it is a little bit more shallow than say the sweater number 14 V-neck, which I knit a few months ago. The neckline took me quite a few days to knit because I sized down to 3.75 millimeter needles for this, just to have a little bit more of a cleaner finish with the 1x1 rib. And also with the V neckline, you do have to work the increases and decreases to shape this V neckline. And I just found that that was very hard on the hands because it is a light worsted weight gauge with the 2 strands of Saona and 1 strand of Mohair. And so that was, I think, already quite tough to work on with 3.75 millimeter needles. I thought it was quite a tight gauge. And then also because you're doing the 2 increases and then the decreases to shape the V-neck, it just took a lot of time. So I ended up working on it for a few rounds and then I'd have to take a break. But I think that's just kind of the price that you have to pay with a V neckline. I think it's kind of unavoidable that you have to do those increases and decreases. So I'm happy that it's done. I already have my original Lakes pullover and then now this V-neck pullover. So I don't think I would knit this V-neck one again. I don't think I'd knit it a second time unless, I don't know, I wanted to gift it to somebody. But I am happy that it's done because I do really like the look. In terms of the sizing, I knit the size small, which has a finished bust of 110 centimeters. The sweater is suggested to have a positive ease of 25 centimeters, or I think if I am doing the conversion right, I think it's 10 inches. So it is a pretty relaxed fit. And I knit the sweater because it was a test knit. I knit it all to pattern. I would say that this sweater has a little bit more of a crop silhouette compared to other Ozetta patterns, which I don't mind because if you watch my episodes before, you know that I do crop almost everything that I knit because I do like things to fit a little bit more cropped because I wear higher waisted pants. So I didn't have any issue with that, but I find that normally Ozetta patterns are a little bit of a longer silhouette and they kind of fit at like the hip bone, but this one is more at the waistline, at least on me. So I am happy with that length. I don't love the sleeve length. I find that they're a little bit too short, but I also do like to have, especially when a sleeve has a bit more of a straight oversized fit, I do like it to fit like mid palm or like almost like in the middle of my fingers. I do like it to have a bit of a longer fit. I just find that more comfortable to wear. And I just think it looks a little bit better proportionally when you don't have like a bracelet length or wrist length sleeve on something so oversized. I think that's maybe a very particular thing that I have, but because this is a test knit, I did knit it to pattern. Haley is normally pretty flexible with allowing modifications, but I don't know, I just decided to knit it to pattern. So yes, this hits about like just at the beginning of your palm, and if I were to knit it again, I would just extend the stockinette here, maybe about 5 centimeters longer, because Saona doesn't really grow that much with blocking, if at all. So really the length that you knit it to is the length that you're going to get. Unlike, I guess, superwash yarn or merino, which can tend to stretch and grow a little bit with blocking. This doesn't, so it's definitely still wearable, and I guess it's better than the sleeves being too long, but I do find the sleeves to be a little bit short on this pullover. And finally, the thoughts on the yarn. So like I said, I used Wool Dreamer Saona in the shade Guthrie, and this is my third time working with Saona yarn, and I do really like it in this finished pullover fabric. I used Saona before for the Lakes tee and the Air tee, and in my experience, I find that the wool is a little bit more, I guess I shouldn't say the wool, but the yarn is a little bit more rustic and woolly compared to other cotton wool fibers that I've worked with before. Like, for example, the Knitting for Olive Cotton Merino. It is very soft, silky, like next to skin comfortable, but this one there is a little bit of wooliness to it, but also dryness from the cotton. It is a very interesting fiber construction, but I just personally wouldn't use it for a summer garment. I just think I don't really reach for those tees as much as I probably could if I knit it with a different fiber, because I do find it is a bit woolly next to skin. You do feel it a little bit. But when I held it with this one strand of mohair, I really love the combination. It is a very lightweight finished fabric. Saona is super lightweight, I think because the wool, it's a 50-50 blend of cotton and wool, but the wool that they use is Manchega wool, which is the same wool that's used in their, what is their yarn called? Manchalopes. It's the same wool that is used for their Manchalopes, which is their unspun wool, and that is super lightweight and airy. It still has a little bit of weight to it because of the cotton, but overall it's a super lightweight piece. So it dries very quickly. It's very warm and lofty. I would say it doesn't have the most drape. I don't know if you can tell by me like sitting here, but there's like some creases here, I guess, because there isn't a ton of drape to the garment, but it is a really nice lightweight layer to wear. So I would totally use Saona again with mohair because I do love the lightness of it. I love the heathering of the Saona. Each of the colors in Saona have a light heathering to it. I wonder if it's the cotton in it that's the lighter shade, and then the wool that they combine is has more of the color or pigment to it, and that's why it's heathered, but it creates a really luscious fabric. I'll insert a photo of when I was working the 1x1 ribbing, but it just looks so, I don't know, like luxurious, exquisite in the 1x1 rib especially. So I would totally use this yarn again. I know that it's kind of easier for me to say that because the yarn was sent to me, but I do really love the yarn. I genuinely do really like it, and I would purchase it again myself. I'm actually thinking of purchasing it for possibly an Anchors cardigan in the future, because I do think it's pretty affordable and worth the price that you pay. I can get it from Montricot, which is a yarn shop in Quebec, and it's $12.75 for a 50-gram ball, which is around 220 meters. So I think it's a really great price, and it's pretty comparable to other fingering weight cotton wool yarns on the market. So I don't have my yarn scale to measure the exact meterage amounts for what I used, and I was really worried actually that I was going to run out of yarn for this project, because usually with Ozetta patterns I size down my needle size, and so I do have a little bit more yarn left over than what I was expecting. I usually use less meterage, but for this one, for whatever reason, maybe because I was using metal needles, or I don't really know, but I didn't have as much yarn as I was expecting left over. So I received 8 balls of Saona and 5 balls of Knitting for Olive mohair, and this is the leftovers of my 7th and 8th ball. And then this is my 4th ball of Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair. I still have a full ball of Dusy mousse to use after this. So I think in total I used about 825 meters of each, of each strand of yarn in this project, or about, if I am estimating and trying to be a little bit more exact, about 7.25 balls of Saona and 3.7 balls of mohair. Last final thoughts, I am really happy with the sweater. There isn't too much, I guess, to say about it. I don't know how long I've been talking though, because it is just a stockinette sweater, but there are some really nice details like the saddle shoulder and the 1x1 rib that just make it a really nice, engaging and timeless piece. I think that if you do like the sweater, there's the original pullover version and then the v-neck. So because they're very similar in terms of ease and sizing. You can kind of just pick whichever one that you like, but I'm happy to have both in my wardrobe. It is a very nice spring day outside, so I'm glad to have this light layer that I'm going to be wearing today. I'm going to keep it on for the rest of the podcast episode. It did feel a little bit different because I usually like to hold up my finished object rather than like model and wear it, but I guess it is kind of nice to just show how the garment drapes and fits. So I'll keep it on for the rest of this episode and we can move on to whips. So the first whip that I have to share is the My Honey Vest. I'm in a bit of an awkward spot with it, but yes, the My Honey Vest by Wool and Beyond. And for this project, the main color of the brioche is Plutolopi in the shade Ivory Beige, and the background color is Artfil MericanaDK in the shade Copper, or I guess maybe the back here would be better to show you. And then for the hem details, I'm using Mominoki Finnwool in the shade Milk Tea. I am currently working on size 3.5mm needles. I had to size up from the 3mm suggested in the pattern, and I'm still not achieving gauge. So we'll get into that in a moment. And I am knitting size medium, which has a finished bust of 100 centimeters, but I am concerned that the finished bust will not be 100 centimeters and it'll be a lot smaller than that. So yeah, maybe we can just get into it. So in terms of the progress that I made from my last podcast episode, I think I had just had the back panel worked, but now I have the first front panel, the front right, and then I'm working on the front left. So with this construction, you do knit that horizontal back panel first, and then you pick up stitches on either side. And for the front panels, it is relatively simple, I would say. You pick up those stitches and then you work some increases, or sorry, you pick up the stitches and then you work it flat, and then you work some increases up here to shape the front of the vest. And then you continue to work it flat until you reach later down in the front panel, and then you start working increases for the armhole. So there's two different points of the front panel where you're working increases, but there is no short rows, which I actually don't know how you would do short rows with brioche. I think that would be extremely confusing. So yes, it is just a straight fit over the shoulder, but I think it'll still be a pretty comfortable fit. So I finished that one for the front right, and then now I'm working on the front left. And to keep track, the pattern uses specific measurements for when you should start working the increases. So it says knit the panel to X centimeters before doing these increases. And I do really like that, because I find with this pattern, I don't really know if my row gauge is accurate. So in the pattern, it says your stitch count gauge should be 16 stitches for every 10 centimeters, but then that's all. They don't really say what your row gauge should be, and I don't think it would be 16 rows. So because I am off gauge, I did size up to 3.5mm needles, and I still am off gauge. I have, before blocking, about 18 stitches for every 10 centimeters, and my swatch after blocking was about 17. So I knew I was going to be one stitch off at least. I don't know if it's going to be like that with a finished object. And so I kind of feel like that means that I could be off gauge for the row count as well, but I don't really know. So it is nice that the pattern, all to say, it is nice that the pattern includes the measurements of what each section should be like before working the increases or parts of the pattern. And I mentioned that because I just wanted to show, in order to do the same thing on the left front, I've been putting my stitch markers on to mark when I am doing increases. So that is really helpful. I kind of wish that I did that for the back panel, because I knit the back panel and then I didn't knit on this for probably about a week or so. And I'm still kind of having trouble counting rows with 2-color honeycomb brioche. So I don't remember if I actually worked the proper number of increases for the back panel. It's kind of hard to tell, I think, where you are working increases. So I kind of wish that I used those stitch markers and put them where the increases is, so I could make sure that I am working them correctly. I think I am starting to get the hang of it though, of how to measure it, but it is still a little bit tricky to tell, I think. So yes, I kind of wish I would have done that, and I would recommend doing that if you're doing this pattern or just brioche in general. Just mark on the wrong side with the purl bumps what rows that you're on. I think that would be really helpful. And like I mentioned, I'm having the gauge issues. So I sized up to 3.5 millimeter needles, and I probably could have sized up more to 4 millimeter needles to achieve gauge, or to better achieve gauge, but I really didn't like the look of the honeycomb brioche on a larger needle size, so I didn't want to go up more. So that's why I decided to size up to a size medium, which has a finished bust of 100 centimeters. The pattern doesn't say how much suggested ease you should have, but I assume it's not more than like 5 to 10 centimeters based off of how it looks on the designer. So I sized up to the size medium, which has the 100 centimeter finished bust, hoping that it would kind of work out. So the finished bust would be about 90 centimeters. But I am a little bit nervous about that because I finished the back panel increases, and they're currently on some scrap yarn, and I measured the width of what the back panel looks like right now, and it's only about 37 centimeters. So 37 multiplied by 2, it's not going to be close to about a 90 centimeter finished bust. I don't want to speak to it too much now because I haven't done it yet and I don't want to mislead anybody, but I'm thinking of adding some more increases to the back and to the front panels. Because I assume that if I'm off on stitch count gauge, I could be off on row gauge, so it wouldn't hurt to add a little bit more length, I think. So I'm gonna add one more increase repeat to the back, one more to the front right, and then one more to the front left. And then because of that, every increase round, you're increasing by 3 stitches. So hopefully that extra 12 stitches, because there would be 6 more stitches at the back, 3 more stitches at the right front, 3 more stitches on the left front. Hopefully those additional 12 stitches will not throw off the proportions of the vest, but it's going to just give some more width around the bust and also around just the rest of the vest. I'm hoping that that's going to work out because Plutolopi is not really that froggable. So I really, starting over is not an option, and frogging is quite limited as well. So I'm kind of just winging it as I go, and hopefully it works out. I think by adding those increases, it should be okay. But yes, I am a little bit worried about how this vest is going to fit. And this isn't the fault of the designer because it's my gauge issues that are causing this problem. I did notice though that a few Ravelry project pages for this design did say that they also were off gauge. So maybe it's a more common issue. So yeah, I'm just trying to make those modifications so the vest fits a little bit better, and I'll report back in my next podcast episode how it all goes. My next project is another textured project, and it is my Esther Jacket by Petite. So for this project, I'm using Knit Picks Wool of the Andes in the shade Almond, and then I'm holding it with Drops Kid Silk also in the shade Almond. And for this project, I am, it's knit on 5mm needles, and I am doing a hybrid between a size extra, extra small and an extra small because I did want a little bit less positive ease than what is suggested in the pattern, but I found extra, extra small would be a little bit too small, so I'm kind of doing it in between, and hopefully it's working out. And so far I've knit the back panel, the 2 front panels, and I just joined in the round last night. So I have those extra casted on stitches, but I haven't worked them yet. So quite literally just joined it in the round. And with this jacket, I was also having some fit issues or challenges, but also at the fault of myself because I was trying to make some modifications. So for this Esther jacket, I found that it's kind of hard to tell, and there hasn't been that many finished object projects because the pattern is newer. But I think I mentioned in my last podcast episode that I find that the sleeves of this jacket are quite bulky and large, and I wanted the sleeves to have a little bit more of a slimmer fit. So what I decided to do was I first knit the back panel to be about 2 centimeters shorter in length, and then I was going to do the same to the front panel, so then the armhole total depth would be shorter than the pattern, and so that would create a more tighter armhole. But that didn't really end up working out. So with the back panel, it is shorter than the front panel because of that sloped shoulder. And so I knew that the front panel was going to be longer, but I didn't really know how much longer it was going to be. And so after I knit the back panel to be 2 centimeters less, or to 21 centimeters, as measured from the cast on to the bottom, and then I also knit the front panel to be 2 centimeters less, the armhole was going to be too small, like way too small. I have a picture that I took when I realized that this was not going to work out. So I went back and I added 1 centimeter to the back and then 1 centimeter to the 2 fronts, tried it on again. I still thought it was going to be too tight, so I ended up knitting it exactly to pattern for size extra, extra small. I knit the back panel and the front panels to be 23 centimeters. And I think I could still try to modify it. Like, I'll just change the pickup ratio for the sleeves and maybe pick up less stitches, or I might not do that because clearly this modification isn't really working out very well. But I do want to figure out how to make the sleeves look a little bit less bulky. I'll figure that out later. So I just joined the panels together, and then now I'm just going to be working the body flat. And yeah, it's a really nice pattern. I'm really enjoying how it's working up. I think I am starting to understand the motif, the pattern motif, a little bit better, because I was having some challenges with reading the work, especially on the wrong side. But someone had left a really helpful comment, I think 2 podcast episodes ago, just to remember the key numbers in the pattern. So it's just really helped me to remember the numbers 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, and 13, as well as 6. If you know, you know, I guess. So yeah, hopefully that may be helpful to you if you're also having trouble with remembering the stitch count or the pattern motif of this jacket. But that mental reminder was really helpful. So thank you to the individual that left that comment. And yeah, I'm just gonna be working away at the body, and I'll probably pick up soon for the sleeves just to see how they're going to fit as well. And the last whip that I have to share is also one in my last podcast episode. I don't have any new cast-ons yet because I'm trying to finish whips that I've been working on before I leave, but I will be casting on 2 new projects, which I'll get into in a little bit for the trip. So yes, these are the vanilla socks, the vanilla sock pattern by the Crazy Sock Lady, and I've knit the first sock only until the toe, and I've casted on the second sock. I'm using Lang Yowel for the contrast cast on the heel, as well as I'm going to be using it for the toe. And then the sock yarn that I'm using is, I don't know what this yarn is. I got it on Facebook Marketplace. Someone was destashing some of their yarn, but it didn't have a yarn label, so I don't know what this yarn is, which was also why I used the Yowel for the heel and the toe, because just in case there's no nylon in it, I wanted to make sure that those parts of the sock would be reinforced. But I do think that the Yowel is working out well with this yarn. There is like some really tiny speckles in this yarn that kind of work out with, that kind of correspond with the Yowel. So I do think it's a nice combination, and I'm knitting the size medium in the pattern with my Crazy Trios in size 2.25 millimeter needles. So this was supposed to be my entry into the Shorty Sock Cal hosted by MSC Makes, but that ended and I did not finish the socks. I think at that point I hadn't even casted on my second one, but I am happy that I still attempted to join that knit along, because it did give me the push that I needed to cast on another pair of socks and try to knit them as quickly as I could. So I finished knitting this sock kind of, until the toe, and then I cast it on this one, which I think is going to be my strategy for trying to stop second sock syndrome. I think if I haven't finished the first sock, then maybe it'll make me more motivated to knit this second sock, but progress is a little bit slow on these socks ever since the cal ended. I haven't had that much motivation on these socks. Another reason why I haven't really finished this sock yet is because I am having trouble with measuring how long socks should be, the foot of the sock should be, before you start working the toe decreases. With my Sunday socks by Petite knit, those are my first ever sock project, and I knit those socks too short, so the heel keeps going lower down on my foot. I should have knit it, maybe I would say about 2 centimeters longer. So I think one day I'll go back and add some length to those, but it's kind of throwing me off on how to measure the length of the foot of the sock before working the toe decreases. So that's also kind of why I haven't done them yet. I'm kind of procrastinating on that. But I'm hoping that if I knit the second sock to this same length, then I can kind of have a better understanding and then finish off both socks at the same time. And with this pattern, I really enjoy how it's working up. The Crazy Sock Lady has so many video tutorials and resources available. This pattern was highly recommended, so I do really like the pattern, but I am finding with this sock, it's not finished yet, but I am not sure how the sock is fitting or how it's supposed to fit, because the vanilla sock pattern by the Crazy Sock Lady is intended to be like a mid-calf sock, but I modified mine to be a higher ankle sock. I didn't want it to be a full shorty sock, but I did shorten the sock so it could be a shorty sock knit along entry. And I'm finding that after the 2x2 rib cuff, the sock is a little bit too big around the ankle. It kind of bunches up a little bit, but it does fit around the foot, or maybe it could be a little bit tighter. I'm just kind of basing it off of the commercial socks that I have, which have a little bit more of a snug, tighter fit. I think that maybe I could have knit or cast on the size small 60 stitches for the cast on for the ankle, and then just worked maybe a few less gusset decreases, so I would have the size medium for the foot, or 64 stitches, because yeah, I find that it is a little bit of a looser fit around the ankle, but maybe that's just how shorty socks usually fit. I don't really know. I know I have wider feet though. I always end up having to get wider fitting shoes, so I do think that the 64 stitches works for the foot, but around the ankle, I think it could be a little bit tighter. I'm not gonna do that for the second sock because I want them to match, but I guess it's just a lesson learned moving forward. I just have to knit a few more socks to get the optimal fit and what actually works for my foot. I don't know though, so let me know down below if that's how socks in your experience normally fit, or maybe I do need to decrease the stitch count. And those were all of my whips. I don't have any acquisitions in this episode, and I don't have any new cast-ons, but I do have some plans. So in my my last video before this one, I had a more casual sit-down chatting about what projects I wanted to bring on my upcoming 3-week trip. I was chatting about projects that I thought were travel-friendly, so they were small, portable, kind of time-consuming, and just chatting through which ones I was thinking of, and I wanted everyone's help in the comments to help me decide, and people left some really helpful comments, and I think I landed on the 2 that I'm going to cast on. I'm going to be going back to my apartment tonight, so I'll probably cast them on tomorrow just so they're on the needles before I leave for the trip, but I don't have those needles with me, so yes, I have to wait till I get back. I'm going to be knitting the pie camisole with onling number 11, which is the yarn that I won from the pie camisole knit along giveaway last year. So of course, only fitting that I knit a second pie camisole, which is probably my most worn knit project that I've ever done. So that'll be the first one that I'm going to cast on. And then the second one is the Mermaid Tail Socks by Needles and Life. I wasn't sure about this yarn as well, similar to my other sock yarn. I have a few of these skeins that don't have any labels on them because I got them either from Facebook Marketplace or yarn swaps. This one I got from the Knit-O-Matic yarn swap, and it didn't have a label, and I wasn't sure if it had nylon in it, but 2 people left some really helpful comments of how to test if there may be nylon in sock yarn. So the first suggestion was to just like a strength test, to pull the yarn really, really hard. And usually if it's just 100% wool, it will fall apart and break. The fibers will come apart. But if there's nylon, it's usually very hard to try and pull apart and break by hand. So I did that with the little section that they use to tie the yarn together. I do think this yarn is hand dyed, I think. So I did cut a little piece off, and then I tried to pull it, didn't break. So I was like, okay, that's pretty promising. And then the second comment that another person left was to do a burn test. So usually when you burn a 100% animal fiber, it will just disintegrate and there'll be nothing left. But if you try to burn the yarn and there's a little bit of plasticky remnants, it usually means there's nylon, because that's the nylon that's left after you burn it. So I cut another little section, and then I burned that on aluminum foil, and it did leave a little bit of residue. Like there's this little black shriveled up thing afterwards, which I think was the nylon. So I'm kind of confident that this may be a nylon based yarn. Of course, we'll never know, but that did give me the confidence, and I was leaning more towards that sock project because it is kind of beachy and I'm going to be by the water at some point, so I thought it'd be a cool project to bring. So I'm going to be casting both of these on. So in my next podcast episode, when I come back, these may be finished, they may be not, but they are upcoming plans that I'm really excited about. And that was everything for podcast episode number 11. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much if you reached this point in the video. I will be gone for a little bit of time, but I did pre-film 2 videos that I'm going to be editing and releasing on my trip, just because I figured I'm gonna have a lot of downtime at a lot of airports. So I did decide to film 2 videos where I'm gonna be chatting and reflecting about summer projects that I've knit in the past. So it's going to be a 2-part video series. The first one is going to be me chatting about knitting flops, projects that I've knit, specifically knit tanks and tops that I've knit that I don't really like and I don't wear, and just kind of reflecting a little bit more about them. And the second part of that series is going to be talking about tanks and tops that I've knit and I absolutely love, and just reflecting on how I'm going to be approaching summer knitting moving forward. I don't think that I'm much of a summer knitter. I don't really love knitting tanks and tops very much. The progress is really fast, but I find that I love knitting my sweaters, but I do want to knit a few more tanks and tops, and I just want to be a little bit more selective about them. So I won't get too much into it now, but those are the 2 videos that I'm going to be editing and releasing in the next few weeks, and then I'll be back for podcast episode number 12. So yes, I hope you're excited for those videos. I did really like filming them and reflecting, so I thought they would be really fun to release as we approach summer knitting season. So until those videos, I will see you, or I guess I'll see you in those videos. All right.